Of the ASPIC, the new association, dear distinguished guests, dear friends. It's a great pleasure and honor for me to welcome you to this conference of today on behalf of Calouste Gulbenkian Foundation. We are deeply honored to host this event, and I'm particularly pleased to have the privilege to open the first conference of this new association, and therefore to announce, let me say, Urbi et Orbi, that a new association devoted to cancer, known under the acronymus ASPIC, is born. And the question is there a justification, is there a need? Is there a room for a new association related to cancer? Which difference can it make? And my answer to this question is yes. There is a justification, there is a need, there is room for a new association. And I would advance three main reasons. One is that ASPIC aims to strengthen the network of all people, researchers, that dedicate their lives to the study of cancer. In times of difficulties and constraints, to work together make us stronger. And the networking of this association to international forum and international networks, namely and international bodies, the EACR, the European Association for Cancer Research, and the affiliation of this association, is an added value to this project. And I think because of this and the enthusiasm and punch of Leonor David, this a new player that should be taken into account for the future of cancer research in Portugal. The second reason for a positive answer to the question I raised is related to the fact that one of the ASPIC's objectives is the promotion or to foster the participation of the society at large in cancer research to fundraising campaigns and activities. We absolutely need to promote the individual responsibility in research through contributions that might fulfill what some ethicists and philosophers call the scientific citizenship. So, in times of, as I said, major financial constraints, is of most relevance to everyone to take the responsibility to contribute to health research, since health is a public good that everyone should protect, should defend, and help to sustain. And there is an additional and third reason to say yes to the question I raised, is the credibility of the ASPIC's board members, people with important professional careers, going from the treatment of patients to laboratory activities, making patients' lives better and to contribute to increase our knowledge about cancer and their mechanisms. And therefore, it's my great pleasure to give the floor to Leonor David and congratulate her for the activity made just for the organization and of this association.
So good afternoon to friends and colleagues and invited guests for being here today. And a special word to begin of gratitude to Jorge Soares and the Fundação Gulbenkian for the support they gave to the association from the very first hour, and in particular to the organization of this meeting. Thank you very much, Jorge. So, I will very briefly, before setting the stage for our guests, tell a bit of the history of the association, how it was built and what is it for. And the reasoning behind this was that I was a council member of the European Association for Cancer Research. I was an elected council member representative of Portugal, and stimulated very much by the president of the association at the time, Júlio Celis. I was supported to start an initiative that would gather cancer researchers from different disciplines together in meetings and in other activities funded by the European Association for Cancer Research. And we did such a first meeting in 29 October last year in Porto. We had a special guest that is a cancer researcher from Portugal that works in United Kingdom, Carlos Caldas. And it was a very, very stimulating event because from this first objective we could jump to the next step. And this was because the participation of the researchers in this meeting was extremely enthusiastic. We had 200 people because we couldn't hold for more in the room, so we had to cancel the registrations at 200. In a difficult time already last year, there was already difficulties in moving around. And we had 83 posters, and basically this meeting is probably the first, I mean, there is the first handout of what's being done in Portugal in cancer research, is the abstract book of this meeting. I think it's very useful for all of us to see what's going on in cancer research in Portugal, because most people were there. So because of this setting, we decided that we had the right timing to establish a cancer research association in Portugal under the auspices of the European Association for Cancer Research. And also from the beginning, we decided that this association would be interdisciplinary as a major idea, because we are a small country, we have very few people working in different areas, people are very isolated, and people feel the need of getting together and discuss the issues collectively. So this is an example of one of the plenary sessions we had that was chaired by Professor Sobrinho Simões and Mariano Gago, and where we had people from cancer registries, people from hospital departments, and people from the physics area that are developing devices for diagnostic and therapeutic purposes that we never heard about, the cancer researchers that do the biomed usual stuff, never heard about before, and that we understood at that meeting difficulties in getting contact with us, researchers in cancer in our country, and that were developing their projects in France and in other countries because they couldn't get in touch with cancer researchers in our own country. So I think this is an idea that was put forward in the beginning, and I think we should keep for the future as a major asset that we have, is to have people from very different areas working in this field. And the other thing was that even within the bio thing, we should have more connection between clinicians and scientists, basic scientists. Usually, clinicians make their congresses and meetings where they invite one or two basic scientists, like 2 flowers to put on the lapel, and that's all. And the other way around, I mean, basic scientists sometimes invite some clinicians just to do. So we think we have to do better on that side as well. So the first meeting also set the ground for that. We had clinicians and we had basic scientists together and trying to dialogue, to make a dialogue in between them, which was, I think, quite novel in our field. So this, as I said, told us that we could envision to make this association. It was a bit of an endeavor. I don't know why I did, in fact, why I did do this, but it so happened that I did. So the public bid of the association was on February 1st of this year, so it was very fast indeed. And because we had a confidence, a trust that was settled with the European Association for Cancer Research, mainly through Julius Ellis, but also with the Secretariat in Nottingham and so on. I think we had the trust that allowed that few days later we had the approval of the European Association for Cancer Research to have our association as an affiliated society member. So now Portugal sort of finally is among the 14 countries in Europe that are affiliated to a network of researchers in Europe. So I think that's very important and very nice for us. Okay, so this was in February, and in March we launched a website that is a very important connection tissue for the researchers. And this was, as I said, in March, and it's a bit ridiculous. I mean, for a Dane working person and an UK person, that we put on the news the papers that are published by Portuguese scientists. But you have to, this will be ridiculous in England, right? But in Portugal, I'll show you, it's very interesting because, I mean, we, and I will mention the person that is doing this, have news that are publications in international journals from the Portuguese people working in Portugal and abroad. And we, of course, make announcements on all the openings for calls for research projects in Portugal and abroad, prizes and every opportunity that comes in a difficult time for the Portuguese researchers. We also have meeting news and employment, which is one of the pages that has been naturally more visited lately because people are looking after opportunities. But this has allowed us, I mean, to know each other by faces, I mean, at least. This is just a few of the 60 publications that we have announced on the ASPIC website. People have submitted the news on the publications they are doing. And we have a lot of people from very different areas, pharmacy in Porto, and then you have chemists from Madeira Island, and then you have Peter Jordan from the INSA that is here today, and we have people from our institute around here, IMM, Coimbra, people from very different areas. And for the first time, I think many of us have seen the faces, at least on the internet, of our colleagues that sometimes are working next door and doing things that we didn't know they were doing. And I am particularly proud to mention that we have also papers from people in Mozambique. Carla Carrillo is the pathologist and a very interesting person that is working in Mozambique. And she submitted a paper that I think it's amazing because she is publishing in Mozambique now, carcinomas of the conjunctiva are killing, I mean, like crazy. I don't know what's exactly the rank. It's second in rank. It's incredible. And what we have studied with her is the causes for this particular setting. And it's a mixture probably of sun exposure and HIV, and curiously, HPV of cutaneous types that usually don't give rise to cancer, but that in this special setting are giving rise to cancer. So this is a fantastic model for people that work on virus and cancer to contact. So they will know people through this way. And also to meet the Portuguese that are abroad, and that very often are a link for our students to go abroad. We have a girl from Algarve that has worked with Carlos Caldas in the audience, and I mean, Carlos and Samuel Aparicio are two scientists that are very well known in the cancer field nowadays. Others are just younger ones. Castelo Branco is also a senior scientist abroad. But we have younger people that Sonia Melo is thinking about coming back to Portugal next year, so she will come. And so we have also their publications announced in the website. And so the meeting and the website together are allowing us to know each other, which is the first step, to trust a little bit more each other, and to know what our neighbors are doing and what the people around us are doing, so that we can connect our forces. But of course we have so many things to do, like sharing efforts to increase the standards of the research that is made in Portugal. And we also need to increase our European connections, and the European Association for Cancer Research is instrumental on this side. And of course we will start having, hopefully, some influence on the policies, and I'm looking at George because he's the policy maker all the funding in cancer research in Portugal nowadays. So we have to influence him somehow. Okay, so this is, I mean, Luis is very proud of these numbers. I'm very embarrassed with these numbers, but this is apparently important. I mean, we are having over 1,000 visitors in last month, and it has been increasing steadily over month after month. We have lots of first visits, but also lots of people that come back and back again. There is a lot of people from Portugal, but also a lot of people from abroad that are looking at our website from very different places. And against my will, she opened a Facebook thing, and she's doing the, and there's a lot of people that come through Facebook, so I have to probably accept that Facebook is okay. So the person that is doing all this is Luisa Melo. She's a journalist, and she's helping us in the coordination of all this. I mean, she has done all this, so I'm very grateful to her. And she's doing this with very little economic effort. She's in a half-time position in the association. We have very limited resources that come from our sponsors and from the members' fees, which is not a huge amount so far. And of course, we will intend to have a paradigmatic transparency, and our report next year will show that. We have now a campaign for getting more members. We just went sort of over the 100 members recently, and we will have this campaign till the end of the year so that we have more people on the association, which I think is going to happen in these last 2 months. And the banners are very nice. Nuno Marcos is a scientist and is doing for free all this work for us, and I also am grateful to him for this. We will have the next step, public major thing, will be the first Congress that will be in Lisbon. That will be in November 2014, and we still don't know where exactly it's going to be, but soon, very, very soon, we will settle down on that. But we know that we want to maintain the interdisciplinary approach, and we know that we want to maintain a tight connection with the European Association for Cancer Research, and we have already established a connection with the Spanish Association for Cancer Research. I was there in the Congress in last September, and we decided together with Alfredo Carrato to have a permanent ASPIC symposium in the Spain and in the Portuguese counterparts. Luckily, we have congresses that will be on alternate years, so we have on even years and they will have on uneven years, so it's going to be fine to do that. And they were very, very happy with this idea, and I was very happy too. So the funding is a problem. I mean, this is just, I'm depicting here the numbers that are correspond to the FCT openings on the cancer research area. FCT has been opening relatively regular projects on all fields. And then there is funding that is very, very uneven. Portuguese League Against Cancer, the Carlos Gulbenkian Foundation, the pharmaceutical industry here represented, and that's not very regular. It depends on the settings. And we have some international opportunities that we have obviously to increase our capacity to apply to. But the funding in Portugal and the numbers here, I'm under discussion with FCT about these numbers. I mean, the FCT has reported to a newspaper last week that we have 11 million euros funding from 2008 to 2012, because they did count not only the projects that won in the oncobiology field, but also any project that had a word on cancer or tumor or whatever, which is maybe okay. We have to discuss that, but there is a problem here, obvious problem, that is it will multiply the numbers, because if they are asked about what projects on infection, then numbers will come again, and I think it's bad for the foundation and for scientists in general that we give the idea that we have a lot of money, that after all is so little. I mean, even if it was 11 millions and not the 3.3 that we have counted, it would be ridiculous, because this is not a year funding, this is the funding for these years, and it includes overheads for institutions, and it includes salaries for grantees in the project. So this is a ridiculous amount of funding that we have, and we have to make an effort to try to influence George Soares to make. No. Okay, so I think that in line with the need that we have to make this subject more relevant into the society, the subject of the meeting today and this conference on public benefit of cancer research perfectly goes into one of the objectives of the association that, as George said, was to make relevant to the public what we are doing as cancer research in the labs and in the clinics and so on. And I think that we have the privilege of working in a research area that is obviously relevant to people. And so we also have the obligation to be a sort of a landmark to other scientific areas of the interest of scientific research in general to the public. So we should be an example. And I think that the two guests that we have selected to come here today, as we will see, Nick Jones and Julio Celis, are paradigms of persons that have been involved in major efforts to influence this panorama. So I think it was a good choice. And then a final word to thank the sponsors. And we have as sponsors the Fundação Carlos Gulbenkian from the very first day, and IPATIMUB as well. The two oncology institutes from Porto and Lisbon have been also supporting us from the very first day, and Champalimau Foundation and Fundação para a Ciência e Tecnologia, and two pharmaceutical companies, Novartis and AstraZeneca. And just before letting and calling Fátima Cardoso, that's my vice president, and she's from the Fundação Champalimau, and that will just introduce the session in per se. I want to thank personally Nick Jones and Julio Celis for this retrospectively seen. I mean, it was an insane invitation that I made you to come to here and then next day to Porto, but I thank you very much for having accepted that. Fátima, please.
Thank you, Leonor, and thank you everyone for being here. Thank you especially to Julio and Nick. Julio I know for many years, and we worked together at the ECHO, the European Cancer Organization. Nick, I will have the pleasure to know better. So the involvement, I just want to make 2 points, and I will not take too long, but I'll just make the point of how important it is that the general population is involved in everything related to cancer. And as Professor Subinho Simões has said quite often, and it has made an impact in very few in a very few number of years, 1 out of 2 or 1 out of 3 Portuguese will have cancer sometime during their lifetime. And this means that we directly or very close relatives or friends will be touched by this disease. So this is not a disease that we'll hear about in the TV sometime or we'll read about it. It is something that touches our lives every day, already now and more for the future. So when I was starting to study oncology, I saw this saying that has stayed with me, and it is kind of funny, although extremely serious, which says that if you don't die of a heart attack, there's always a cancer waiting for you. And it is actually the truth nowadays. We should add also if you don't have a car accident. That is another big killer. So right this weekend, we had here in Lisbon more than 1,000 experts in advanced breast cancer, a disease that is just a part of the whole spectrum of cancers, but that kills 500,000 women every single day, every single year, I apologize. And this, we cannot make it change if we don't get researchers and clinicians together. It's indispensable. One cannot do research in the lab forgetting the main reason to do research, and we cannot apply in the clinic if we do not understand what's being done in the lab. So this brought together these two worlds is of extreme importance, and this is what ASPIC is trying to do at the level of our country, but it's also what many other organizations, ERCR, EACR, for example, is trying to do at the European level. So it is my great pleasure to open the session by itself on public benefit of cancer research, and I will first call Professor Manuela Becassis that will introduce the first speaker. And Professor Manuela Becassis is a worldwide expert in hematology and transplantation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fatima Canary, for your very kind introduction. I'm not a great world expert in bone marrow transplantation. I'm just a bone marrow transplanter, that's all. And before I do my job, which is to introduce Professor Nick Jones, I'd like to congratulate Leonor. She has done really a superb work, and I was really impressed with all these things that you showed us. Most of us are aware of this situation, and really, we didn't care very much. I mean, we felt more or less comfortable in our own settings, and these things, as you said, to open the doors, to contact others, and to connect in the network is really what we need. And I think that is particularly important in nowadays, in the difficult times we are living. If we share resources, if we share knowledge, then we will make progress, and that is really very positive. Now, it's my great pleasure to introduce Professor Nick Jones, who is Director of Manchester Cancer Research Centre and Chief Scientist of Cancer Research UK. He's also a senior leader at the Cell Regulation Laboratory of the Patterson Institute for Cancer Research. Professor Jones qualified as a microbiologist at University College London and took his PhD in molecular biology at the University of Edinburgh. He then went to the United States to take a postdoc position at the University of Connecticut Medical School to study bacterial cell division before moving to Indiana University, where he set his own research lab to study cell proliferation and growth and the genes involved in viral-mediated malignant transformation of normal cells. So he said, during all his lifetime, a very close connection with oncology and all these basic mechanisms of how the cells become malignant. And that's what we need to know, really. If we want to treat properly our patients, we need to know why these cells are behaving like they are. And then he went back to the UK. He joined the Imperial Cancer Research Fund in London as a senior scientist, and then moved to Manchester to become director of the Patterson Institute for Cancer Research. Now, Professor Nick Jones will tell us about the patient and public benefits of cancer research under the perspective of the Cancer Research UK. Professor Nick Jones, please.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. And let me start by saying it's a real pleasure to be here, and really to be here as a supporting ASPIC. I think it's a really very important, very interesting, very exciting initiative. And what I'd like to do is from a Cancer UK perspective, really try and give you some confidence that actually over time, and it will take time, but over time, the benefits that will accrue to both patients and to the general public will be significant, as well as really coordinating research efforts so that you maximize the effect of the research output that you have in terms of understanding cancer and treating cancer in the future. So I'm going to give the perspective from Cancer Research UK. Cancer Research UK really is, in many ways, it's the cancer research voice of the UK. And it really coordinates most of the cancer research that goes on in the United Kingdom. So I think from that perspective, it's really an organization that absolutely kind of oversees our cancer research efforts. And I think by using Cancer Research UK as an exemplar of how we can affect patients and the public through through organising our cancer research efforts. I mean, hopefully you will be convinced that the benefits will come over time. So, in order for me to kind of really tell you how Cancer Research UK is doing that, is really making an impact, I need to tell you about the organisation itself a little bit, who we are and what we do. And then I can go on to give you some examples, really, of the impact that we do make. Oh, okay. So you've seen this already. But no, that's yours. Here we go. Yep. Okay. So as I say, let me tell you a little bit about Cancer Research UK. Actually, Cancer Research UK is only about 11 years old. It was formed in 2002. But it formed by the merger of two very large cancer charities that came together in 2002. And they have a very long history. In fact, they have a history which goes back 80 to 100 years. So Cancer Research UK, if you take its predecessors into consideration, really has been going for about 100 years, funding research in cancer and organising research in cancer. So obviously a lot longer than ASPIC. And what it is today is a very large organisation, very diverse organisation. It's a fundraising organisation. I'll say a little bit, but not too much about that. But mainly it's a research organisation, funding research, organising research, really driving research in a particular strategic direction, which we think really meets the needs for cancer research in the future. In fact, Cancer Research UK is the largest fundraising medical research charity in the world. And outside of the NCI, it's actually the largest funder of cancer research in the world. And just to put that in perspective, it raises and spends something like £300 million a year. In fact, it raises close to £500 million a year from the public. No government money, this is all from the public. And that allows us to spend about £350 million a year on research that we do. So we're very, very fortunate that we have a culture, a really long-standing culture, of giving towards causes such as medical needs, and especially cancer, because, as we've heard, cancer touches almost everybody in the country. So this allows us to support over 5,000 scientists, clinicians, and nurses right over the country. We also provide information to the public and patients, and I'll go on to describe that a little bit. And clearly, because we're large, because we're organised, because we really form the umbrella organisation of cancer research in the UK, we can influence government policy. We have one voice, one really concerted voice. It's an educated voice, it's an informed voice, and that means the government can't ignore us quite so easily. So, as I say, we are a fundraising organisation. I'm going to say very little about fundraising. It's very diverse. It involves events, it involves corporate partnerships, it involves shops, it involves individual donors, it involves legacies. So it's very successful, as I say, it's large and successful. But the main thing I want to say here is really it's a mass fundraising organisation. And that's really of benefit, obviously, in terms of raising funds. But there's also a real benefit in terms of engaging with the public and having the public be involved in the cancer cause, be involved in partnership with us to really kind of work cooperatively to try and find answers to this very, very complex disease. And I'll come back to this issue about how we engage the public in the future, later on in this talk. Okay, so with that as background, let me just move on and say where I think, just list a few areas where I think we as a national organisation really do have an influence. And then I'm going to provide some examples in each of these cases to really exemplify this impact. I mean, clearly we are a fundraising organisation, we can fund research. So providing funding to all areas of cancer research is obviously very important. I think now is not the time not to be funding cancer research, not to be increasing cancer research funding. We're on the brink of making real inroads in this really complex disease. We should be pouring a lot more research funding into cancer and not decreasing. I really, truly believe that. We're able to stimulate research in areas that are important for public and patient benefit, and I'm going to give you some examples of that. We provide patients nationwide the opportunity to participate in research, and that's really important. Patients do want to be involved in the whole research endeavor, and there are a number of ways in which we can allow that to happen. We can influence government policy on cancer, as I said. We engage the public and patients in the fight against cancer, and we have a platform to inform and support the public in changing their behaviors. And again, I'll give you examples of that. And last, there's a long-term economic benefit to the UK through the cancer research that we do. And again, I'll provide some examples. So let me go on and really exemplify some of these benefits and some of the impact through giving specific examples. So fundamentally, we are a research organization. We fund and organize cancer research in the UK, as I said. Our mission is to save lives. Now, in order really to fulfill that mission, that means we have to fund research across the whole spectrum, from basic to clinical research. More than that, we have to integrate our research efforts across the basic to clinical research spectrum. That integration, that iteration between the laboratory, between the clinic, between basic and clinical research is crucial if you're going to really make inroads in terms of combating cancer. Now, we fund our research through a number of different kind of ways. I'm not going to really dwell on them too much. But for example, we fund some core institutes where we provide core funding for these institutes. And these institutes are very much involved in trying to understand cancer in more detail. We have response mode program grants. These are 5-year grants. We fund investigators throughout the country. And obviously, it's very important that we train the next generation of cancer research, both non-clinical and clinical researchers. In the translational space, and I'll say a little bit more about this, we organize our research around a small number of cancer centers. We also have centers of excellence in drug discovery and imaging and in biomarker research. And at the clinical end, we support a large number of clinical trials, as well as providing the infrastructure to allow these trials to take place, and take place in a way where the translational research element of these trials can also be supported. But as I say, the really crucial aspect is to integrate really research across basic, translational, and clinical research to have a seamless interaction across this spectrum. And underpinning this research that we do, there are certain principles which I think are clearly important. The right people. We have to fund the right people to ensure that we have the quality research that we need. We have to provide the right culture. And what I mean by this, we have to have centers and promote centers where there's an ethos of interaction in a multidisciplinary way, an ethos of interaction between the laboratory and clinic. And we have to provide the right environment. And what I mean by that is we have to provide infrastructure funding to allow scientists and clinical scientists to really flourish in that environment. That might be clinical trial infrastructure, there might be biobanking infrastructure, there might be imaging infrastructure. So we need the right people, the right culture, and the right environment. And those are the kind of principles that we work in terms of funding our research efforts. Now, I'm going to give you some kind of more specific examples of the impact we can make. So let me first start off with basic science. And we fund a lot of really great science. And this is an example here. You've seen this character before. You'll all recognize this person, Carlos Caldas. And Carlos obviously works in Cambridge. He's actually in one of our core-funded institutes in Cambridge. He's a fantastic clinical academic. I think a real exemplar of excellence as a clinical academic. And as you know, he's had a long-term interest in breast cancer. So within the last year to 2 years, Carlos has published a really important study called Metabrick, which we funded. And it was a very large study. And essentially, this was all about really characterizing in detail the genomic fingerprints of 2,000 different breast tumor samples where you had linked clinical data. And I won't go into the details, but essentially what Carlos was able to do and his colleagues were able to do was to really identify or substratify breast cancer into 10 different subgroups. Each of these subgroups have a particular molecular signature that you can identify. And each of these subgroups have a different prognosis. So for example, in the plot here you see, which ones are they now? 5 and 2. If you have signature 5 or 2, you have a very poor prognosis. If you have a signature number 3, you have a better prognosis. So in other words, you can really subdivide breast cancer into all of these different subcategories based on the molecular signature that they've identified. Now, why is this important? I think it's important in 2 ways. First of all, it really helps us to understand the disease in more detail, the complexity of the disease. We need to understand why a cancer that has this signature does so poorly compared to a cancer that has a different type of signature. So by understanding, by delving into the actual changes that occur in this subgroup versus that, we can understand what's driving the disease in these particular subgroups. Secondly, I think this kind of data is going to be critical if we really are going along the lines, which we are, of a more personalized approach to cancer treatment, a more precise approach to cancer treatment in the future. I mean, clearly, these different subgroups, we would think about the way we treat those subgroups very differently because of the prognosis that they have and the different signatures that they have. So it's a really great example, I think, from a great scientist of the kind of really detailed molecular work you need to carry out to understand the disease in the detail that we do need to understand it. Another very example, a really great example, I think, but I'm not going to dwell on it too much, is from Charlie Swanson's lab. He's in another institute of cancer research, which happens to be in London. I'm very proud of Charlie because he used to be my PhD student, so maybe that's why I chose it as an example. But essentially what Charlie did was take multiple samples, multiple biopsies from the same tumor. In this case, it happened to be a kidney tumor. So different biopsies from the same tumor, characterized again genomically, so whole genome sequencing. And what you then see is the complexity of cancer in all its glory, the heterogeneity of different genetic changes you see across a particular tumor. We already know about heterogeneity between tumors of different patients, but heterogeneity within a single tumor is really quite immense. And not only that, this kind of study really shows the dynamic nature and the dynamic changes that occur within a particular tumor. Tumors evolve. And in fact, they evolve because they're driven by genomic abnormalities. And they evolve in a way which is very similar to the kind of branched Darwinian evolution that was described many, many years ago. This kind of study is going to be crucial in terms of influencing the way we think about how we treat cancers. And it's going to be crucial in terms of understanding resistance mechanisms that almost invariably arise. So this is another example of the kind of basic research that in the end is going to have a huge impact on patients because that kind of basic understanding really underpins the translational research that we do and the clinical research that we do in the future. So we have to continue funding really fantastic fundamental research because we need to understand the disease in so much detail. So moving on to the kind of more translational area, because in the end, understanding the disease is great, but we need to translate that understanding into better treatments, better diagnosis, etc. We really focus a lot of our translational efforts on these centers that we've set up throughout the UK. The idea behind setting these centers up is to really bring academic researchers and clinicians together, working together, hand in hand, to a common strategy and common goals. And it's really developing partnerships at these different locations, partnerships between the universities and the NHS providers and the Cancer Network. So it's all about bringing multiple disciplines together to work cooperatively in these particular centers. Without that, our chances of really translating the research that we do and the understanding that we're gaining around cancer is going to be diminished. And we can facilitate that by really providing infrastructure funding in these centres, for example, for early phase clinical trials or the translational research that takes place, for example, in terms of training of clinical and non-clinical researchers, and providing seed funding for novel research ideas, particularly ideas that come at the interface between the different disciplines, let's say between a laboratory and a clinical kind of research endeavour. Now, I've already also mentioned that we have centres of excellence in terms of drug discovery, imaging, and institutes. And again, what we try and do is co-locate these centres of excellence. So, for example, here in Manchester, and in London, and in Cambridge. So again, really maximising the benefit we get out of all the funding we put in a particular location. And I actually think as we go forward and the complexity of doing translational clinical research increases and funding becomes very challenging and so on, that focusing research efforts on a few centres that really have the depth and breadth to be able to carry out translational research is going to be increasingly important. Let me move on to clinical research, which of course is the closest to the patient in terms of potential benefit. I mean, we do have a very proud record in the UK in terms of patients participating in clinical trials. So right now, something like 20% of all our cancer patients are on clinical trials. And that compares extremely favorably to, for example, the US, where you're talking about 4 or 5%. And it's really important. And Cancer Research UK is very much involved in this. As you say, the number of trials that Cancer Research UK has supported has gone up gradually over the years. And now we have something like 35,000 patients on Cancer Research UK supported trials every year. We need to increase that. We need to keep this going. The more patients we have on trials, the better it is for us and for the patients. Of course, it's better because it means we're doing more trials to really test new potential therapies. But also is really valuable to the patients. And patients value the extra monitoring and expertise they get when they're on trials. They value the opportunity. I think it's really important. They really value the opportunity of being involved in cancer research by participating in trials. And most of them know the trial's not going to help them, but it is going to help the future generation. And they really appreciate the fact that they can do that and be involved in the research endeavour. And there is quite a lot of evidence now, emerging evidence, that at least for some cancers, if you're on trials, then you do better in terms because of the general care that you get or the improved care that you get if you're on trials. So it's very important to have an increasing number of patients on trials, and that's something that we need to endeavour to keep increasing. Now, our research is not just focused on patient treatment. I mean, I think the benefits to patients and to the public go way beyond just treatment and really goes into areas such as screening, prevention, and early diagnosis. And a really good example of this is flexible sigmoidoscopy. And this really came from a study that Cancer Research UK supported. It was a study of 40,000 people, individuals between the age of 55 and 64, where they were regular sigmoidoscopy was undertaken to really essentially try and detect polyps that arise within the bowel. And if polyps do arise or are seen, then they're removed. The results of those studies were actually quite stupendous. And as a result, the NHS have now adopted as a regular kind of screen flexible sigmoidoscopy in patients of that age group. And the estimate is that this approach alone prevents probably about 5,000 people from being diagnosed with bowel cancer every year. It prevents about 3,000 people from dying from the disease in the UK. So talking about patient benefit or public benefit, screening provides unbelievable public benefit. But also, as you see here, has the potential to save many, many millions of pounds to the NHS, to the government, through the lives that through the fact that we're preventing people from getting the disease in the first place. So I think it's a really good example. There are many examples like this, but it's a good example of how research into screening is really important in terms of providing benefit in a number of different ways. Another very major area that we're involved in and is again incredibly important in terms of public benefit is prevention. And our research really goes back quite a long way in terms of prevention. In fact, cancer research, or its predecessors, funded Richard Dole and Richard Peto, who were the first to really show the link between smoking and lung cancer many, many years ago. And since then, we've continued to do a lot of work in terms of looking at different lifestyle factors and environmental factors that affect cancer. And about a year ago, we published a very extensive study. It was the biggest study of its sort ever done, really looking at a whole range of lifestyle factors and how it affects particular types of cancer. Now, this is a complex diagram. I'm not going to go into it, but as you see, lung cancer here, tobacco is obviously the main risk factor. In melanoma, sunlight is the main risk factor. In bowel cancer, red meat or overweight is a big risk factor. And in fact, this study as a whole really came to the conclusion that something like 40% of all cancers could be avoided through behavioral change, through really recognizing the risk factors and really having a lifestyle which minimize the effect of those risk factors. And the risk factors are the ones we know: tobacco, overweight, low fruit, alcohol, occupation, sunlight, etc. That knowledge is obviously incredibly important, but what do you do with that knowledge? It's one thing having that knowledge, another thing what do you do about it? And that's where the public engagement really comes in and is really so important. And an organization like Cancer UK, which is a national organization, can really make inroads in terms of engaging the public in a really powerful way. So, for example, our specialist nurses answered requests from over 10,000 people last year. Over 35,000 patients join our trials every year. We have a roadshow, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute, where 65,000 visitors came to the roadshow and were informed about some of these environmental and lifestyle factors that affect cancer. And we have a website, a Cancer Help UK website, and something like 10 million people joined that website or accessed that website in the last year. And of course, we have our fundraising effort. And as I say, by mass fundraising, we're actually engaging people in a very, very important way, in a very direct way, into the cancer research efforts. And just to give you a kind of flavor of that, there's an event we have which is called, well, it's a running event. It's called Race for Life. So a number of races throughout the 5K races for women throughout the country. It engages 600,000 women every year. Now next year, another 600,000 women will be engaged, but there's only 20% similar between one year to the next. So we've got to engage another 400,000 new women into the cancer cause. So just through the fundraising efforts, we really engage the public in a very important and significant way. And I think that's, it gives us a huge opportunity, obviously, to get a message across to the public. And that's what we do through various public campaigns. So, for example, we ran a campaign really explaining the dangers of using sunbeds, especially for young girls under the age of 18. And as a result of that campaign, now sunbeds are banned for under 18-year-olds in the UK. We can distribute various leaflets which really inform about some of the early signs of cancer and so on to the public because we engage in such a mass way. And we have these roadshows, which are really mobile units that go into public areas, especially areas of relative deprivation where cancer rates are very high. And people can come along and really learn about some of the risk factors that we know about and what they can do to really minimize those risks as much as they can. And to really also recognize early signs of cancer. And of course, if we can make inroads in terms of recognizing early signs and for them to do something about it, then that would really save a tremendous number of lives. So I think this engagement is critically important. We wouldn't be able to do that if we weren't organized as a kind of almost like a national organization, because we have one kind of face that really that we have with the public. I mean, the good news is, I mean, you know, survival rates are moving in the right direction. Progress is being made. The tough thing is that obviously incidence of cancer is also increasing quite significantly because of the aging kind of population. But nevertheless, in most cancers, progress is being made through the kind of research that's been done throughout the world over the many years. There are some cancers where you can't say that. And these are the cancers at the bottom here. Pancreas, lung, esophageal, brain. Very little progress over the last 30 or 40 years in terms of survival rates. So what can we do about that? Because we can organize cancer research nationally, because we can fund cancer research in a national way, we can direct funding to these cancers of unmet need and really ensure that opportunities and priorities for funding in the future, that we direct them to these areas of unmet need, like pancreatic, brain, lung, and esophageal, and that's exactly what we're doing right now, as well as recognizing other areas where we really need to do more through additional funding. And early diagnosis is a good case in point. You know, considering how much benefit you can provide patients if you could diagnose cancer earlier, actually the relative amount of funding that's gone into early diagnosis compared to other areas like treatment and so on is ridiculously low. So we need to do more. Although it's complex, we need to do more in terms of really pushing research into early diagnosis. And as an organization, we're actually doing that now, and yeah, I think it's a really important way to go. Okay, so I want to finish off by two more other areas of benefit that I just want to touch upon. One is influencing government policy, and we've heard about that a little bit already. Now, this would be either research or charity policy, i.e. increasing funding into research would be a good one. Prevention, as I've already described, treatment, obviously, and early diagnosis, really having a concerted effort in terms of diagnosing cancer earlier. And again, because we really have an educated voice, we really have an informed and evidence-based voice, we can really influence government in these areas. It is actually hard for the government to totally ignore a national organization that really is putting forward its case on evidence alone. And I guess the best example of that over the recent years has been tobacco control. And it's in the UK, and I'm sure it's true here in Portugal as well, the rate of tobacco consumption has been going down consistently over the last few years. It's now at about 20%, which is good, but it's not good enough. We need to be pushing it so it's down to 10 or 15%, which is where it's at in Australia, for example. So there's no reason we can't go further. And we need to go further. It saves many, many, many lives. Now, this just hadn't happened just by chance. It happened because of lobbying that was done by organizations like Cancer Research UK based on the evidence there is. We provided the first evidence to link smoking to cancer. Cancer Research UK played a key role in ensuring advertising of tobacco was banned in 2002. 2007, smoke-free workplaces. This was huge. Whoever, if you've been to the UK, obviously you've been to pubs because pubs are part of the social life of the UK. If you went to pubs before 2007, wasn't a fantastic place to be honest, because everybody was smoking. It was terrible. You came out of there, you smelled. Now it's fantastic. Right? There's no smoking in pubs. That made a huge difference. So banning smoking in public places really made a big difference. Now our big lobbying is plain packaging, and we really, really try very hard to lobby the government for plain packaging. We want to make cigarettes and tobacco packages not really sexy for young people. We don't want young people to be starting on taking tobacco. It's a hard fight. We haven't got there yet. They're doing it in Australia, so that's great. But we're lobbying very hard to really get plain packaging taken up. And finally, I have mentioned the economic benefit as well that research has. I mean, clearly, the more we do in terms of successful treatment, the more we do in terms of prevention, so the more economic benefit it will be to the whole NHS system, to the whole government system in the UK. Equally, UK is a major hub for the life science industry. It has big companies within the UK, it has a very vibrant life science industry, and we need to keep that going through the research that we need to make it attractive for AstraZeneca and GSK to stay in the UK and not go to the US. And so it's a very important role we have to play in making sure that our research environment is an environment that really makes them want to stay in the UK. And maybe more directly, Cancer UK has created a lot of spin-off companies through the research that it does, and over time that does provide economic benefit. So I'm going to finish. Looking ahead, I think more than ever, it's essential that nationally cancer research is coordinated and integrated. I think it's absolutely essential. It's got to be coordinated, it's got to be ambitious, and it's got to be well funded. And whether that funding comes from government sources or charities or both, there has to be funding in order to really develop and push the cancer research agenda. And increasingly, and I think maybe we'll hear a little bit about this from Julio, I mean, increasingly, I think national organizations need to work more closely together, pan-European, and I think there's been some fantastic pan-European initiatives to do this, and more international collaborations and consortia in various aspects of cancer research. I mean, cancer, doesn't recognize any national boundaries. We're all facing the same challenge, and it's a huge challenge because of the complexity of the disease. So we need to be working more closely together to really reach that enormous challenge. And I think, hopefully I've given you some example. I know it's, we have a long history, and we're very fortunate in the fact that we do have a large amount of funding coming from the public. And we realize how fortunate we are in that. But I've really what I try to do is try and illustrate how, by being a national organization, we can really begin to influence patient and public in a number of different areas. And I think in many of these, you will be able to do through ASPIC in the future. And it will take time, but hopefully you will look at exemplars throughout the world. And I think cancer is one example where it'll give you confidence that you can really influence in an important way. So I really applaud the aspirations of ASPIC. Congratulations on getting it going. I understand it's taken quite an effort to get it going. I think it will provide tremendous value to the research community as well as to patients and to the public at large. So I wish it well. I'll look forward to seeing how it progresses. And thanks very much again for inviting me to participate in this.
Thank you very much, Nick, for this inspiring talk. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Professor Mariano Gago, who will introduce Julio Celis. And Professor Mariano Gago is very well known in Portugal. He is our ex-Minister of Science and Technology, and he is also extremely important for the ECHO organization, since he is one of our counselors and advisors in the Oncopolicy Committee.
Well, thank you very much, Fatima. Well, I'm just an experimental particle physicist. So my connection with cancer is just because we use beams, and you use beams to sometimes to treat, and we are able to deliver images sometime, and sometimes some images are better than others, and you can use them. That's very little. But my role here is to introduce Professor Julio Celis, and I'd like first of all to praise our hosts, the Gulbenkian Foundation and Professor Jorge Soares, to thank ASPIC for this initiative, and to stress from a science policy point of view how important it is the creation of this association for Portuguese science and for Portuguese biomedical science as an example of many other initiatives that we need for the progress of science. And to praise its initiators, all of them, and very especially Professor Leonor David for her efforts, for the creation and success in the creation of ASPIC. Now, Julio. Julio Celis is a friend, and it's not easy for a friend to introduce another friend. Okay, he's a very distinguished scientist. He's an outstanding European science policy organizer, and he's a really outstanding citizen. As a distinguished scientist from different field, it should not be my role to introduce him. I can quote comments and CVs that have been prepared by others from your own field. He is, as some of you know, he was born in Chile, then he did his PhD in the United States, then he went to the United Kingdom, and finally he settled in Denmark. And most of his professional career was as a researcher in Denmark, and then as director of the Institute for Cancer Biology in the Danish Cancer Society. And I've as an outsider of the field, I've looked into his many biographers and people who have written about him. And what was impressive is the unanimity of all of them saying that he was. It must be strange to be called the father of proteomics, but that's it. That's what comes out of that strange animal called the web. Now, you are the father of proteomics, okay, and that means a lot for the majority of your colleagues. Your colleagues are recognizing you now. And it's not something that happened 2 or 3 years ago. It's something that has been built over the time and now has come to a level of very large recognition by the community. Now, my personal contribution to your introduction is in the science policy field. I've known Julio Celis for more than 1 decade, and we have worked together very concretely. When he was at FEBS, he was Secretary General of the Federation of the European Biochemical Society, and then we were together in the campaign for the creation of the European Research Council, and astonishingly, that campaign was successful. Sometimes scientists can be successful in science policy. And then more recently in what is a starting point for a new role of the scientific community in the strategic steering of research and of research policy in Europe. And that was done by the biomedical community, and only by the biomedical community through ECHO and the Biomedical Alliance. And it resulted, after an enormous effort during almost 2 years, in a small result, the creation of the so-called Scientific Panel for Health Research in Horizon 2020, the new framework program for research at the European Union. And it's extraordinary to think how difficult it is, or it has been, to achieve such a modest result. And how difficult it will be to achieve something of the order of the intervention that scientists have in the design and steering of strategic science policy at European level, as compared, for instance, what has been established for a long time at national level in Europe, or at a federal level in countries like the United States with the National Institutes for Health. Julio has been one of the most prominent organizers in science policy, And the biomedical community must be praised by all other fields, by the contribution that it's giving to the role of to raising the role of the scientific community. Well, that means that we scientists have more to do in science policy at European level, and you have yourself showed us and helped us in that direction. Thank you very much, Julio.
Well, first of all, thanks very much, Mariano, for these kind words. And of course, I have enjoyed every minute of the 10 years we have worked together. And even though things have been small, it has been a pleasure and a very difficult task to really get from the beginning of a diffuse idea into an object of desire, as Mariano has always told us, that we should really make sure that we make that diffuse idea into something concrete that everybody can see and moved. Now, to begin with, I would like to thank, of course, the organizers, ASPIC, the Gulbenkian. This, I think it's a very important time for everybody, and I must say I agree this is not going to be easy. I'm Chilean, and so I know how difficult it is to come up with new ideas and implement new things when there is not a culture to be able to do that. And I think only through partnership, then I think you start learning how to join effort and try to solve problems in partnership. Now, what I will do is I will tell you a little bit about what the challenges that Europe is facing in cancer research, and at the same time tell you a little bit about what the scientific cancer community has been doing in Europe for the last 3 or 4 years in order to assure that cancer remains at the top of the agenda of policymakers. This is not a simple thing. It requires to be constant, to be ambitious, and to make sure that you don't give up, because there are many examples where things do not work, and then, of course, if you not really believe on it, then it will never happen. So I hope I will convince you about that. Now, the problem, and I think this is very important, because cancer is one of the major issues affecting our societies, and the situation is set to worsen globally as the population ages. Now, in 2012 alone, 2.6 million European citizens were diagnosed with some type of cancer. And in the same year, cancer killed about 1,300,000 people in the European Union. Now, this is interesting data. And in some way, there is a paradox, because there is significant progress in research and better understanding of the biological process underlying disease pathogenesis. Yet, there has been slow translation of research discoveries into concrete benefit for patients. Now, a simple explanation for this, we need to find an explanation why this is so. It is perhaps because the pathway through which discoveries are translated into innovation that benefit patients are complex and difficult to control and manage. And beside that, the lack of a common European insight as to how to fight the disease has been detrimental to the progress of scientific knowledge and quality of care. So these are more or less the challenges that we are facing. And the European Union Innovation Union, Europe Strategy for Growth, proposed, among other things, to move good ideas to the market in an effort to improve life, get better society, economic growth, and more jobs as a response to the challenges of why we're not really translating our efforts into concrete benefits. Now, for us in health, and particularly in cancer, this means speeding the translation of basic discoveries into clinical application. And I think that's the centerpiece, and I think we're going to see a lot of that. Now, in order to do that, we need to shorten the time between discovery and implementation in the clinic. All right? And this is, I think, to me, one of the major problems that we have, which most of the time has not been really addressed completely. Now, the innovation cycle that goes from basic science to early translation, late translation, dissemination, and adoption, it is a very complex and long process. It involves different teams, whether you are a basic scientist, or whether you are on a clinical study, or whether you are on the pharmaceutical industry, or whether you are now on health services research, which is becoming one of the most prominent priorities on this cycle, mainly because we are producing discoveries which are moving along, and we don't really know exactly what is going to be the effectiveness, the cost effectiveness of some of the new drugs or new treatments that are going to be used. And that, of course, is having a great impact on the member states, because they have to reimburse for some of this, and they don't know exactly how to decide what is the cost effectiveness. And so there is a lot of different players here. First, we have the different teams. We have different partnership as we move along. We have different infrastructures. And all of that, of course, need to be put together with the fact that we do have a lot of different gaps, which are due to regulatory, educational, and sustainability issues. So if we're going to move a discovery, then of course, every time that we move, there is a gap. And of course, most of the time, we don't really have a solution to that gap, and we don't really have a vision as Europe, how we're going to solve that. And the gaps are very important because, let's say, for a drug, it might take 12, 14 years to move it through the cycle, yet our funding, or the instruments that we have to fund research, they only go for 3 or 5 years. And once you have actually finished with that, there is no other mechanism where you can really continue with this. So we've been, for many years, I think, wasting a lot of effort on, because we have not been able to really have a vision on how we should deal with these many gaps that we have. The same is true with the regulatory issues, where only now we're starting to realize that we need to work. All of the stakeholders here need to work together to be able to come up with a vision of how to solve this problem. Now, to be able to deal with these challenges of posed by the innovation cycle and translational research, I think we at the European level, we need to create a vision for cancer research that take into account both the EU and the national priorities. And you'll be surprised, I'll be talking about that. There is very little knowledge on priorities at national level versus priorities at the EU level. On the other hand, you have to realize that 95% of the money invested in cancer research remains in the member states, while only 5% of this goes into community research. So we need to address that, because it is not possible for, let's say, the Commission to be able to implement bigger ideas because of this constraint. We also need to stimulate coordination of cancer research at national, regional, and EU level. We need to work in partnership across borders. I think that's becoming more and more important, because we now realize that cancer is so complex that not a single lab, not a single institution, not even a single country or continent is going to be able to solve this problem. So we need to learn how to work in partnership. We need to address, of course, the research and innovation bottlenecks. We need to have a solution for that. We need to encourage the collaboration between DG Sanco and DG Research and between health ministers and research ministers. And of course, this perhaps it's not very clear for other continents, but you have to realize that research is a competence of the European Union, but health is not. And then all of a sudden we have a disease that goes all the way from discovery to treatment and care. And the ministries are not really working together, nor is DG Sanco. So we need to stimulate that and put a lot of effort on that. And at the end, we also need to inform society of civic society at large of the benefit of research, because political powers are mainly sensitive to public opinion, and not just to scientists, because everybody believes that scientists, they just want money. And perhaps it's true, but I think we need to leave to our societal responsibility. Now, if we're going to do any of this, you require to have a structure, you require to be proactive, and you need to work proactively on the various stakeholders in the European research area. We have to deal with the EU triangle, the European Parliament, the Commission, and the Member States. We need to work with funding agencies, patient organizations, scientific organizations, university, hospital centers, ethical legal bodies, regulatory bodies, private sector, and so on. So there are many places that you really need to sit with them and try to come up with a common idea how you're going to fight the disease. In our case, when we started with this, we thought we need to identify a scientific organization that will have the critical mass and expertise in policy that would allow us to derive strategies and to chart a course of action. This, of course, was not a very difficult task, because we had ECHO, the European Cancer Organization, which is an organization that has 50,000 plus oncology research, oncology-related professionals across the cancer continuum. It has everybody. It has the basic researchers, has the nurses, the medical oncologists, the surgeons, radiation oncologists, and so on and so forth. So it was a very good place to start with and try to organize how we are going to deal with political powers by providing input to the right policy. Now, what is the ECHO added value? Why we didn't pick any other organization? Well, ECHO embodies multidisciplinarity and multi-professionalism. Connect all the stakeholders along the cancer continuum. State the case for better support of cancer research, promote the advancement of discoveries and their translation, and provides the voice of a consensus of European oncology, and I think this is something that Leonor was telling you. You need to speak with a single voice. Every time we went to a commissioner to ask for something, he said, come back when you have put your act together. Because if I say yes to you, I have to say no to somebody else, and I will lose. All right? So that pushed us to get this single voice on actions of common interest across the various disciplines. Now, the main value to me in ECHO is the fact that ECHO is the patient-centered organization that firmly believes that every cancer patient deserves the best. I think that's the motto where we would like to go, and everything else needs to be adapted to that sort of commitment. Now, the ECHO-ONCO policy scope range from research to multidisciplinary care. In research, we strive for sustainable, strategic, evidence-based planning of European cancer research. We foster coordination both of research and funding, and we encourage multidisciplinary partnership. In care, we promote high-quality multidisciplinary guidelines. We develop strategies to support high-level multidisciplinary care throughout Europe, and we improve translation of outcomes into integrated cancer care strategy. Now, when we began with this, we had to make a decision. Where are we going to put our, where are we going to put our resources? And since most of these are health issues, we decided to go for the research issues, because there the Commission could actually make decision, which was not easy with the health issues. So, to be able to do that, we created various policy platforms. Thanks to the support of the actual two last presidents of ECHO, who were very keen on moving this, we created in 2008 an onco-policy committee, which is made of scientists, clinicians, and we have political advisor where Mariano has been our main political advisor, even though we also have Peter Lang, who has been Director General of the Life Science at the Ministry in Germany, so he actually helped us very much too. And we have also engaged now Commissioner Buscan, who now has time to be able to dedicate some of his precious time to policy. We have created a patient advisory committee, which actually has representation of all cancers. We have created the European Academy of Cancer Science, because at that time we thought we could not have a policy committee without having a body that would be able to give advice that is independent advice from ECHO. And then we created an annual oncopolicy forum to be able to discuss common insights as how to fight cancer. So we could actually have ideas, we could get advice, and then we could discuss them with all the stakeholders. And we carry that oncopolicy forum every year, well, every other year at the ECHO Congress, and in the other years in Brussels. And I think that is a very good, has resulted in many positive outcomes out of it. Now we also, ECHO also participate in EU grants, EU projects, because we need funding to be able to structure some other things that we would like to do. So for example, we are part of the Eurocan platform, which is the network of 23 cancer centers in Europe for structuring cancer research in Europe. And there we, our role is mostly looking for sustainability. How we're going to make sure that the actions can be continued along the time that it takes to really come up with the treatments and diagnostic that we need. And then we have created, also we have got into the European Partnership for Action Against Cancer, which I will talk, because this was a very interesting sort of proposal from the Commission, where I will tell you what we saw in there as a possibility to start looking into sustainability by getting the member states involved in co-financing. And then we have created a strategic alliance, and I will be talking about the Biomed Alliance, which look into the future of health research in Europe, and I think this is what Mariano referred to, the introduction, where we have been able to get this scientific panel for health in place, and I'll say a few things about that. Now, ECHO identified two targets in the Innovation Union where we should put our effort, our little money that we have, to be able to get something back to the scientific community, both in terms of new instrument or mechanism to coordinate cancer research, as in the case of the European Partnership for Action Against Cancer, which that is a joint action funded by DG SANCO and the member state that seek a joint response to prevent and control cancer. So it's a very large project, and I will talk about that. And then the other one was Horizon 2020, the EU instrument to fund research in the period 2014-2020, where we had to address the health societal challenge. So I will start with this because I think it has given something new, something I think we never had access to, that is the interaction with the member states funders. The objective of EPAC in research in coordination of research was very ambitious. This was started in 2011. And we were asked to develop a concerted approach for coordination of 1/3 of cancer research amounting to 1.5 billion euros from all funding sources across Europe by 2013. Now this was incredible, but we decided to really go for it because there was something there. And the idea was how we could modify that to be able to make something out of it. Now, our associate partners for this work package in coordination of research are mainly member states. We have we have INCA in France, we have the Instituto Superiore di Sanità in Italy, and then we have two large centers of funders in Spain, the Instituto de Salud Carlos III and the Centro Superior de Investigación en Salud Pública. And we work with DG Sanco and DG Research. Now this has been a very interesting experience, and of course we immediately realized it was impossible to coordinate 1/3 of all. It's just impossible. But then we said, well, we would propose that we do different. We go slowly, and after a little fight with the DG Sanco, we would allow to move into these new objectives, which is to identify and prioritize areas in cancer research that will benefit from coordination. We wanted to know what were the priorities from the basic research of the clinicians, everybody across the cancer continuum, and we asked the member states for their priorities. And then we would like to know which one of these priorities coincide so we can move forward. And at the same time, we could ask the member states what sort of coordination mechanism they have, because some of them perhaps didn't have any, or there was a need to create something. Once that was identified, the priorities, then we could start thinking about developing a coordination approach that will ensure that national decisions are taken based on a joint EU-wide understanding. So again, to avoid that the EU goes one way and the member states another way, so can we find something that we say, well, this is needed to be able to satisfy the goals of the Innovation Union. And then, of course, the last part was to implement a few pilot projects, large pilot projects of research coordination in selected areas to understand how we could do that. Now, this has been a very interesting experience, and I just give you here. We started this in 2011. We had a lot of different meetings. We started with, of course, this consultation for the scientific community and the member state to identify priorities. Then we got into agreement with the member states on common principles of coordination. Then we move into building a consensus with all stakeholders on how we should go. And finally, we identified the 3 countries that were together with us, France, Italy, and Spain. We convinced them to lead, spearhead the development of methodologies to coordinate key areas through pilot projects. This was a very interesting process because in the middle of it, we had a lot of priorities. We have no countries that wanted to be part of that. So then we said, well, to our partners, if you don't do it, who is going to do this? So luckily, France took the lead, and then both Spain and Italy came in. And then we have now created this pilot project. I'll just say a few words about that, and we are expected to, perhaps within January, we will present this to the member states and policymakers and the Commission in order to see how these are going to be evaluated and how we are going to proceed further. Now, the most important thing of all here was the fact that in some way we created a forum where all the stakeholders, including the funder, could sit together as we are here, and we can discuss priorities, and we could identify who would like to do this or that, to be able to move things in a way that was not possible before, to be able to do big things that you couldn't do with the money that is either in a single member state or together with the Commission in the framework programs. This idea of a forum, I will talk a little bit later on because we are moving that idea now to the scientific panel for health, how that panel could help the Commission to engage the member states to be able to do things which are a bit more complicated. Now, the 3 pilot projects that are in the implementation phase are very interesting. One is the European Cancer Research Coordination in Early Phase Clinical Research. That's clinical trials. And I will just, it's the only one I will say a little bit more. And that is spearheaded by France. The second one is a platform for cancer outcomes research. As I said before, outcome research is becoming terribly important. And these projects, what we have done is we try to get everybody in the scientific community together and create a vision for what we should do and make sure that everybody agree before we move that into the political arena. Because our problem before has been that we create something and then a lot of people come and say, well, I've never heard of this. I wasn't part of this. And then, of course, the funder says, we cannot really do because, again, we are not going to win. So we decide to agree on this beforehand and then move it into. And this is being spearheaded by Italy. And then we have prevention. And we've been doing the same with that, and that's led by Spain. And they're all slightly different stages, but they all, I think, are going to go further on. Now, just to give you an idea, the objectives for this clinical trial, early phase clinical trial, pilot project, the purpose of it is to develop at the EU level an organizational framework of designated clinical research centers linked with molecular biology infrastructure. And this is because personalized medicine has become the highest priority of the Union. It also, the purpose is to create public-private partnership with the pharmaceutical industry in order to deliver state-of-the-art biomarker-driven phases 1 and 2 academic clinical trials on investigational drugs. Now, PP1 is modeled on the French CLIP program, which is very successful, where France has put a lot of money to be able to get mutation analysis and other genomic aberrations, and together with the UK Alliance program, have kicked off that, and we expect that a few more countries will join, perhaps in the next couple of years. And the idea with this is to get that program going to all the countries in Europe, so then everybody has access to the same standards and the same tests and so on and so forth. So I think it's very nice in that way. Now, lessons learned from this are very clear. That European cancer research priority setting from the beginning, involving the widest range of stakeholders, is, I would say, crucial as a starting point to coordinate initiative. So it's the first time that the scientists were in between the member states and the Commission to be able to come out with this. We also learned that there is no one-size-fits-all solution to coordinate into all areas of knowledge, but rather we will have to find a tailored response to every case. But the pilot projects that we identify are so complex that any of these elements or procedures could derive from them could be applied to any other project that can be put forward. And then, of course, we need a strong commitment and support from the Commission and other EU bodies to facilitate the coordination, and I think this is going to happen. Now, the last part is the second target in the Innovation Union, and that was Horizon 2020, where we proposed that we should create a strategic action for health research. This strategic action was needed to accelerate research and innovation through a strategic science-led action. All of that goes back to all the challenges we thought that we had before, so we need to address those. And that has now ended with the creation of the Scientific Panel for Health Research. It has been approved, but it has not been voted yet by Parliament, but that will happen very soon now, but that will happen. Now, we did this in collaboration as Biomed Alliance. We thought that we need to do that together with all disease organizations because of the nature of Horizon 2020. And Horizon 2020 structure, it consists of excellence in science, industrial leadership, and societal challenges. Of course, the European Research Council is doing very well, but we thought that within the societal challenge of health, demographic change, and well-being, there need to be some sort of a steering, because the ERC, when it was created, it was as suggested by the scientific community, should be a demand-driven council, where you can apply because you have good science, but it's not because somebody decide priorities beforehand. But we thought we needed to have, if you're going to deal with societal challenge within the innovation unit, you need to have a way to ensure that the discoveries are discoveries that can be translated into applications in a very short time. And since health within this challenge comprised cancer, diabetes, cardiovascular, and all the other diseases, and the Commission wanted to make sure that everything was glue, they wouldn't look at it as single disease anymore, then we thought we should unify the biomedical community, and this has happened. We created the Alliance for Biomedical Research in Europe. It's also called the European Alliance for Biomedical Research. It has 21 disease organizations. They are all main organizations. We have cardiovascular, diabetes, respiratory, neurological disease, and so on and so forth. And the beauty is that we do have 400,000 biomedical researchers in this organization, so it has a weight, And so we work in partnership. And why did we wanted to have a strategic action? Mainly because we thought the challenge in health research were large. There was a growing prevalence of chronic diseases, a decline labor force, rising health cost, a fragmented community of innovators, and inadequate research coordination at national, regional, and EU level. So there was a need to create something that makes sure that all of this is taken into account, because we thought that health is wealth. If you had a healthy population, then of course you have more labor, you have more economic growth, and so on and so forth. And I must say that at this time in my life, I have never worked on sort of programs where the economy drives where we want to go. So in the innovation unit, because they want more jobs, they want better lives, but all through the research and innovation. So it's actually what political powers tell us, that, of course, if you create more innovations, that would save a lot of money, or will create new possibilities, which will go back again to the community to do more research and find the balance that is required. So that was important. Now, we thought at that time that this challenge could only be met by increased knowledge throughout the cancer continuum. We need to understand. I think part of the problem is sometimes we've been too much technology-driven, and perhaps not enough has been put in knowledge, understanding the molecular events. And then, of course, developing this scientific-led European research strategy that we propose. And of course, the opportunity was in Horizon 2020. Obviously, we work in 7 years framework program, so if you don't get it right, then 2020 is the next time you can do anything about it. So you have to be proactive on this to be able to read. So we propose that we should create a European Council for Health Research as a way to balance the basic research with the translational part and to certify the aims of the innovation unit. Now, we thought that this European Council for Health Research would be a scientific-led initiative that will ensure scientific input on policy from the outset, from the beginning. Usually, the commissioners put in programs and then they come to the scientists that they ask how we are going to do it. So we thought that perhaps it should be slightly different, where we should put in an input so that they can derive policy. Now, it should involve all the stakeholders, encourage collaboration across border, promote interaction and synergies at EU, national, and regional level, contribute to defining research and translational program, encourage the contribution of other science and technology field, and this has been something that Mariano actually pushed very hard, because we needed to have physics, we needed to have engineering, bioinformatics, a lot of things that were not there. And then, of course, provide scientific advice for new regulatory measures to ensure progress for health research. So we try to cover all the problems that we have within the innovation cycle. And then, of course, we thought that we were not going to be able to create a European Council because we were in the middle of Age 2020. So we thought that the first step towards that would be having a scientific steering group, board, that would actually steer in collaboration with the Commission and the Member States, more or less the points that we have there. Now, this has been an interesting process, which Mariano has been key, because he's the only one understanding how the political system works. We usually create a lot of proposals, but then we don't know, as scientific community, we don't know where to knock the door, all right? And there is where Mariano was key. And what happened is actually in May 2011, the Commission went through the Green Paper consultation to be able to make Horizon 2020. In November, the proposal, legislative proposal, went to the Commission and the European Parliament, from the Commission to the European Parliament and Council. Then negotiation started, both at the Commission, both at the European Parliament and Council. Now, in December 2011, right about 6 months after that, we were late. So we came in, and the Biomed Alliance engaged the medical community to be able to come up with this idea of having a strategic action. So what we did is we created a core group that we asked them to write what this European Council of Health Research should be. What are the ingredients that it should have? And I must say that between December 2011 and April, there were, I think, 3 months where these people met. They produced this paper. This paper went to all of the biomedical organizations. They came back in record time. And by end of April, we have this concept paper. Now, in the meantime, we had to start conversations with the Parliament. And then, of course, we were lucky the Parliament asked Mariano to be more or less their advisor on. So, as a matter of fact, in June 2012, the European Parliament proposes this strategic steering board, where Mariano was very much involved into that. And then this went into the trial. Negotiation started in January 2013, but during this time, the idea of the Council mutated into what we now know as a scientific panel for health. We went from a science-led, scientific-led concept to a science platform, and you will see that. That's why Mariano said a lot of effort. Perhaps it's a small increment, but I mean the advantage is that you are there now, and we need to find out how to proceed. Now, this is the task or the mandate given to this panel, which is not very different to the task that we put in for this council. As a matter of fact, it's almost the same. The only difference is it said that this panel would be a science-led stakeholder platform. We said it should be a scientific-led. All right, that's an interpretation, but that's the way it is. By some reason, the Commission has the right of initiative and would not allow anybody else to take that right. So we are advisor in our capacity. And we are asked to elaborate scientific input concerning this health demographic change and well-being societal challenge. we are to provide a coherent scientific focus analysis of research innovation bottlenecks, so there is the innovation cycle, contribute to the definition of research and innovation priorities, that's also very important, encourage EU-wide scientific participation and help build up capacities and to foster knowledge sharing and a stronger collaboration. So it's a lot in it, and we are now in the process of negotiating with the Commission, which they have asked the Biomed Alliance to provide a kickoff on how do we see this panel should be, the rules of procedure and the term of reference should be made. Now, in our view, this has been, I think, a unique achievement. Little, but it is an achievement. We are part of it for the first time. Now, for the first time, a political agreement has been reached on the need for a comprehensive and long-term scientific strategy to accelerate research and facilitate innovation. And I think this has been, it's been a unique achievement, and we thank Mariano for that, because I think Council was negative to it, Commission was negative to it, it was the Parliament who actually stood up for that, and that was thanks to Mariano being their advisor and being, of course, our advisor, so it actually functioned as a connection. Now, what are the future activities? And of course, we are going to follow up the implementation phase of the panel. We need to identify the rules of procedures and the powers and all of the things, the nomination, who is going to decide who is going to be there. And then, as a cancer community, through the Eurocan platform, we are going to work on the creation of a virtual cancer center in Europe. This is already something that we have been discussing for some time. I mean, it looks like a big thing, but I mean, you should aim to big things to be able to get somewhere. And there are already movements in that direction. ECHO is very much like to do that, in supporting all the cancer centers to try to identify how we should do that. And I'm not going to go in detail because it's still there at the beginning. The idea with this cancer center is to create synergies to stimulate innovation. It's a cross-border collaboration where if you want to do colon cancer, you link all these centers, the best people on those centers. If you have other cancers, you do other things, and that can be extended to topics, to many things that you can have, and it would be a visual thing. Now, I hope that you hear more from that as we go, but our long-term goal, and I have just talked to, well, we have talked to Mariana, and I said, well, are we ready to work for another 7 years or more to try to get a European Institute for Health Research? Now, this is an important tactical thing because I think this is the problem. Europe is not a federal state, so as Mariano said, we cannot wait until, become a federal state. We need to really do something about this, and I think that's very important. Now, if we're going to go into that direction, then every discipline will have to create a visual center for cardiovascular research, for diabetics, and that, of course, is very important for us because ECHO has to agree that we go for the cancer. And then, at the same time, the fact that they have done to move into that direction, then the other organizations will learn from it. So I will now finish. I'm sorry I went beyond the time, but I would like to thank you for your attention. I think we have planted the seeds, and I hope that in partnership we will be able to accelerate the translation of discoveries into applications, whether they are treatment or diagnostic that the patients rightly demand. And I think the fact that the ASPIC has really decided to become an entity and another player on it, I think is delightful, because I think we would need the support of all of the member states, and I think only in partnership we will be able to make an impact on how cancer research is done in Europe. So thanks very much for your attention.
Thank you, Julio. Maybe you don't go down, you just sit on a red chair. And I asked Nick Jones, and I asking Luis Costa, which is the president of General Assembly of ASPIC, to lead a discussion that will be maximum half an hour. But I think there's very interesting issues around here to go through. I think everybody is starving, but there was some food outside that is not for us, so you don't think about it, you just forget about it, and later on we'll move forward.
A lot of words from me, just a great pleasure to be here, and I just would like to give you one comment. We were in the presence not only of two great scientists, but two great policymakers. That's the secret here. Because these are people that knows what is science, but know how to move society and the partners forward to do something together. So we will open discussion to the public here, but if you allow me, I'll start with one or two provocative questions. And the first one is, we heard something that is happening in the UK, a broader view in Europe is economy, as you told us now, is really a player in everything. What are we doing on research to become healthcare more affordable in cancer?
To become what?
More affordable. What can we do in research to do that? Because even personalized medicine can take you to, in one direction, to spare some patients from some treatments, or to recognize some patients to be candidates to more expensive treatments. So everything that we do in science can lead us in different manners. And what I mean is that right now in Cancer Research UK, what are your projects regarding, okay, how can I collaborate with the national health system to become all the, what we can provide to the public more affordable?
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, we see our role as twofold. One is, we see our role as twofold. One is to essentially get to a position where we really, through the research that we've done, can provide better ways of diagnosing cancer, better ways of treating cancer, and so on. So, you know, our number one priority is to do the research, understand cancer in more detail, and then translate that understanding to better treatment. The second role is to, as you say, is to interact with the NHS system and government to ensure that those advances and so on can be broadly taken up by the NHS system, and that the relevant kind of funding and so on that is going to be necessary, and it's going to be a big increase in funding to adopt these kind of more personalized, more precision medicine, that actually takes place. You know, in the end of the day, I mean, it seems to me that the economics of the healthcare are a no-brainer. The more we learn how to treat cancer, the more we learn how to choose the right patient for the right treatment and so on. In the end, the more it's going to benefit government in economic terms as well. We spend so much money right now as a government in the NHS system in terms of treating people in a futile way, where, you know, essentially with a lot of the treatment that we use right now, there's no hope that we have of really controlling the disease or curing the disease, and that's because we're using a very blunt instrument to treat a very, very, very complex disease. So we work very closely with government along you know, all kinds of policy issues, and including, you know, the healthcare issues in terms of how we adopt the kind of new research endeavors and research directions into the healthcare system.
So you are a big ally of the government.
Pardon, sir?
You are a big ally of the government. The government sees
Yeah.
you as a big ally.
Yes, I think most of the time. Sometimes they see us as a pain in the neck. But yeah, no, I mean, I think we have to. I think, you know, again, it's all about having a very logical, evidence-based approach that we have with government, and you know, that evidence base has to be not just in terms of benefits to patients in terms of new kind of ways of diagnosing cancer, new ways of treating cancer, but also the economic benefit argument as well. And I think, you know, we just have to develop, and we have over time, a really mature kind of relationship with government to deal with these very, very difficult and tricky kind of issues.
On the other side, you have also created some spin-offs. I realize that.
Yeah.
So regarding opportunities to create investment, how do you see this subject for you also, Julio, and you, Nick? How can we?
Well, I think we've been reactive. We are bound to be reactive rather than proactive. So I think we should be proactive in the future. We should have foreseen all these problems a long time ago. Now, of course, we know we do have a problem. We know that most of the discoveries died with the clinical trial. And then, of course, the health technology assessment, and they are not aware of what are the pipelines. So we need to really organize this in a way that that everybody understand how we can make this machinery a lot more coherent that it is today. So I think that would only come from understanding, better understanding. I mean, I'm surprised. I've just been to a meeting in Valdebrón in Spain, in Barcelona, 2 days ago, and what people can do today in terms of technology, sequencing, information, it is phenomenal, all right? And then, of course, the thing is, most of these technologies are very expensive. So one of the things that I worry when I look at the European level is the fact that you create a lot of inequalities. All right, that to us is one of the main problems, because countries complain that or patients complain they have not access to the same drugs or so because they are not reimbursed. So I think we need to work in a way that we all understand where do we want to go, what is the role of everybody, what are the roles on your own country, what are the roles within the European Union, so you can make use of all the expertise that you have across borders. But this is going to take time. I mean, we have started with this Eurocam platform where we were given this grant to structure translation of cancer research. But then you realize it's not a very simple thing. You really, you know, even if you have registries, the data is different. You don't have clinical information added to it, so you cannot really find out what is the cost effectiveness of certain treatments, so you could devise whether you can afford it or not. And then we have the data protection directive that there are problems with that, where it's not easy to do research if that goes on. So that's why I think you need to be proactive. You need to identify beforehand what is going to come so that foresee. So we need to work on visions for 2020 or more, not just a vision for next year. It's just not possible. So, and I think we've been pushed to do that because everything is in a short term, and that's it. That's the way it works.
I mean, clearly, one of the tensions is that the challenge we have here is a long-term challenge, and governments obviously don't like to function in terms of long-term kind of vision. So the thing that I worry about quite a bit is, you know, we are making real progress in terms of targeted therapies, for example. You know, there's some fantastic drugs that have been identified and proven to be successful in the clinic, but they're only successful for a very short period of time, as we know, because resistance develops and so on. And yet they're very expensive. And so, you know, you're faced with a situation where, you know, you have great expense, really, for a targeted therapy that provides 3 to 6 months kind of benefit. And you know, to me, this is a step along the way. You know, the future is not going to be single targeted therapies. We know the future is going to be combination of targeted therapies and so on. But this is an important kind of step along the way, and I worry that governments get disillusioned and so on by the lack of step changes that they expect to happen. That's not going to happen. It's an incredibly complex disease, and yeah, you know, I think governments don't like to. They don't understand. They don't like to deal with that kind of complexity. So I worry about that a little bit.
There are questions from the floor. If not, I'll continue. No? Okay. So.
Nope.
No, there's one.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Hand up.
Thank you so much for your presentation. One of the topics that you addressed were clinical trials, and I was really impressed by the number of patients that are currently in clinical trials in UK. I suppose that that is related not only with the activities that you have done in the UK to promote that, but also because you also have a legal framework that allows that in terms of giving information to patients that clinical trials are open, allowing them to participate. Considering that there is a European Trials Directive that has been implemented in Europe, still there are discrepancies regarding clinical trials and the bureaucracy related with clinical trials and the timelines related with approval by the health authorities. At the same time, we see that in Europe clinical trials are decreasing, whereas in the United States they are increasing. What do you think that could be done within the European level in order to increase the number of clinical trials in other countries? Because clearly it's something that from society is highly appreciated by the patients. So what could we do to leverage that?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question, and it's actually a very complex situation, I think. You know, why have been successful in the UK in getting the numbers, you know, fairly high? I think number one, we have an NHS system which is more conducive to getting to organising clinical trials in the way they need to be organised to get large numbers of patients on. Secondly, we really set up a very concerted drive a few years ago to absolutely, you know, increase the information we get to patients, to increase the kind of infrastructure that we provide to centres to allow trials to be developed, to you know, try and as much as we can influence regulations so they don't impede, but they actually facilitate the development of trials. So you know, so I think it hasn't happened by chance. It's happened because a very concerted effort was made to really increase the numbers. And as you say, patients appreciate it. And you know, we're living in a world now that patients have access to information, and you know, they'll know that trials are going on elsewhere, and they'll want to be part of it. And so again, the patient voice, I think, is going to be really important here in terms of pushing that agenda to ensure that more and more research is available to the general, well, to patients and so on. I worry about legislation around clinical trials. You know, I think it's going in the opposite direction that we want right now. I think, you know, in the future, trials are going to have to be much more adaptive, much more multi-arm, and you know, that means that we really can't have a situation where regulations are kind of, as I say, impeding the kind of progress. The way we do trials in the future have to be different from the way we do trials now. You know, if we really believe in the personalized medicine approach or precision medicine approach, then the way that we do trials has to be different. And absolutely, every trial that we do has to have a translational arm. We should not be doing trials anymore where we're not learning from, we're not doing research that's going to identify which patients will, in the end, benefit from a particular kind of treatment regime. So that means we have to also provide the infrastructure to allow trials to take place in centres that can also do this translational research, this biomarker-led research associated with trials. In the future, all trials need to be biomarker-led. We need to stratify patients going into trials.
Two other candidates, Mariano, Gago. Professor Mariano, have it here, and then Fatima.
Well, thank you. Two very short questions. One to you concerning the UK and the fact that cancer research has been so successful in attracting private individual funding. That is quite unique, of course, in science funding in general. And I was trying to understand the consequences of it in the UK. Does it provide any additionality to the Medical Research Council, for instance, or subtractivity, or have you reached the complementarity or specialization? So my question is a science policy question. How this can we expect that to be a kind of very unique phenomena, or is it a phenomenon that could eventually happen elsewhere and to other purposes? My second question is to Julio Celis, is because of I was looking at the public benefit of cancer research, and I'm always surprised on that there is something that is not practical, but the most practical things are normally ideas, long-term ideas. And that in the area of cancer research, probably it's the best candidate within the biomedical community for scientists to come and help to build a more realistic and sensible relation of a societal view, a better societal view of what to expect of the future of healthcare and the future of death. Because when you say, well, 1 million or 2 million people die every year of cancer in Europe, well, 6 million people have to die anyhow of anything, okay? So that creates a very different, have to. So that creates a very, that shows that that question is a question that has to be dealt with by someone. And the best candidates for that are the researchers, because the researchers are trusted by society.
Okay, so, you know, I wish I knew the answer why fundraising for cancer is so successful in the United Kingdom. It is a cultural thing, yeah, and I'll come on to the other part. It is a cultural thing. It's long-standing. What really amazes me is why it's not successful in other countries. So, you know, I mean, UK is not unique in that, you know, 1 in 3 people, you know, get cancer. Every person, every family is influenced by cancer. They know somebody who has cancer. They have a family member who's had cancer. So that's true in all countries. Most of the people that give money to Cancer Research UK give very small amounts. But because it's lots and lots and lots of people, it amounts to a very large number. So what really, I turn it around and say, why isn't it happening in Portugal? Why isn't it happening in Spain? Why isn't it happening in other countries? To be honest, I don't understand. It could, it should. Why shouldn't it? You know, because essentially the cause is the same, the effect is the same. I think, you know, we've got to be it's very important that we provide the public with a reason for giving money to cancer research. We've got to convince the public that what we're doing is really of benefit to them, not just now, but in the future. So, you know, I think organizations, you know, getting together like ASPIC and so on to provide a single voice and so on is incredibly important in terms of that engagement with the public.
You provide results with projects.
Yeah.
That's very important.
Now, the other important question, I think, is, and as a policy question, is does the government see, okay, there's all this money, charity money going into cancer research, so they don't have to put money into it. So is this substitutional? Well, the answer to that is it's kind of in the middle, to be honest. I mean, the government do fund cancer research. They fund cancer research to the MRC. They fund cancer research indirectly through all the infrastructure they provide to the university system and so on. And they fund a lot of clinical cancer research through the NHS and so on. Nevertheless, it is not like the situation you have in the United States, where the NCI spends an enormous amount of money on cancer research. Fundraising for charities like the American Cancer Society and so on is absolutely in addition to an enormous amount that's funded by government. We're not in that situation in the United Kingdom. So it's kind of in between. I think the government should spend more on cancer research, to be honest. And together with what we can provide through fundraising, I think we can do more, we can have more impact, we can make more progress.
Yeah, I would like to comment on the first question too, because I sit on the Danish Cancer Society, which is the largest organization in Denmark. We do have 500,000 members of the public. That's about 10% of the population. Now, we raise about 100 million euros a year. Not in that level, but for a small country, that's a large amount of money. Now, this is done in a way you organize all of the people that work for the organization. They work in every city. So every city has representative, and they actually take care of informing people of the possibilities that there are. We do have an office, central office, where you can call at any time, day or night, if you have a problem. So you will be given advice. So it is a question of organization. Now, the value is that if you have 500,000 members, then you have political power. All right? So that means every single politician, the Queen or the royals, they all want to be part of it, because it's a very prestigious thing. All the actors, all the movie things, all the... So then, we just had an overnight sort of a presentation, and it raised about 20 million in one night. Yes, because you have a company says, I'll give you 1 million. And then all of the other countries need to be there. So you need to have people that really move this, and people that do the work at the level of the, at all levels of civic society. So I think it's possible, and I think here you should be able to organize this. And I know you have the Portuguese League, part of Against Cancer, which are also working with ours and others. And the question is, perhaps in some countries they're a bit fragmented. There are many patient organizations, but for each one of the diseases, so you need to get them together. Now, the other question is it's a more complicated question. We had the same problem when we wanted to create the European Research Council. People say, well, give us an explanation why society, what are the benefits of science for society, before we really go into that. Now here, it's even more complicated because of the fact that we do have a community of researchers that go throughout the continuum, all of which are really following their own orientation. There are very few that really are even aware of all of the problems that are associated. So we need to get into that, and I think that's one of the things ECHO would like to do, is to make sure through the Congress, where we have 18,000 people come, they become truly multidisciplinary. So not that you have a session on basic research and a session on translation, that you include in every session all of the players that are involved, so that people start understanding, starting from education, how the medicine of the future is going to look like.
Okay.
Can I just follow up on that one? So I think the encouraging thing for me is that I actually see the barriers that were there between kind of more basic and clinical research really actually breaking down quite considerably. I think, fantastic scientists now want to address fantastic science, fantastic questions in situations where they can make a difference, where they can have access to clinical samples, they can really address the questions that come up in the clinic, like resistance mechanisms and so on, that really need to be addressed back in the lab. And I'm really seeing a difference in terms of this interface between the basic and clinical science, really breaking down. We have to facilitate that. We have to create centers where that iteration is encouraged, and through our funding mechanisms really encourage that. But it's crucial. But I actually do I'm really encouraged by what I see in that direction.
So just one small comment to this discussion. Why couldn't we or shouldn't we? For example, another very good example is the Netherlands. Small country, but extremely well organized, and millions of euros raised per year and invested in cancer research. And it is because they are well organized. And most probably here, as many of the South European countries, we need to learn much more on how to collaborate, how to get associations and societies all together, and also to educate, starting with the media, and also the general public are not, the science knowledge is a little bit limited. But I wanted to ask you maybe probably the last question because of time. And you both know, because you are both scientists, that with the new advent of molecular biology, we are dissecting each cancer into smaller diseases. So even the very common cancers as breast, colon, and prostate are being subdivided. So we are entering the era where every cancer is rare almost. And so in Europe, multinational research is indispensable. So very few countries will be big enough, perhaps the UK, perhaps Germany or France, but outside those three, no other country will be big enough, and even those three, to study these subtypes of cancer. Now, having coordinated, and Julio knows, a multinational translational research biomarker trial that demanded collection of samples from 10 different European countries and transport of those samples to be stored in one of those countries, it was a nightmare. And it was a nightmare because of the different regulations in the different countries. So for example, in one country you can transport the whole tumor block or tumor sample. In another country you have to extract the RNA. You cannot ship the entire sample, but you can ship the RNA. Explain that to me, I don't know why. And other countries you can ship the tumor, but not the blood. So it is, so in some countries you can have a consent that says, I donate this piece of tumor or this blood for research. In another country you cannot donate what's yourself. So that is in itself, the regulation is itself a nightmare. The second thing it's a nightmare is the funding. And Julio knows I am an extremely high defender of some kind of NCI Europe, because unfortunately all these organized countries, the funding agencies only fund national projects, including UK with some exceptions. The majority of the money goes for the country. It is understandable because it's given by the people of those countries. The problem is how we're going to overcome that and finance multinational research in Europe.
I like Julius.
No, well, I don't think it's a simple solution, but I think just understanding the problem, then we can derive strategies of how to go about it, all right? And we are now at least getting also reaction from the Commission on priorities that perhaps they were not there before. I've just seen they have produced a little paper on personalized medicine, where you'll be very happy that it is a high priority. It includes all the steps, the understanding, the omics and the use, the outcome research, the clinical trials. And then, of course, we need people that work at certain levels where they have influence. And I'm very happy to tell you that Martin Picard got elected to the advisory board in health. in Horizon 2020. So that means he is one of the persons that really understand, because he has gone with you through all of this problem of not being able to do all the experiments or receive all the samples that actually have delayed this for ages, all right? So you need more people that are influential. Now, it's not only at the EU level. I think we need to have, and we have decided that with the European Academy of Cancer Science, that they should do the European overview and then link with every academy on it to make sure that they influence member states on their decisions. And I say that because you said that most of the money that we, for example, in the Cancer Society raise for cancer research, so the impact of that is that the minister decided that they should not give money then, because there was money already there given by the Cancer Society. So we need to, but that only can influence from scientists within the country that have an overview of what is going on outside. Most countries tend to be rather isolated on the way they decide. They don't really take these things in consideration. So it should be a new way to be more open, more global, share information, share knowledge, flow, dissemination, and so on and so forth. And that's why we need these large organizations like ECHO, because through the Congress is where you're going to get all these changes. The way they do things different. So we don't go to a Congress and we just go to a session on breast cancer or in some other thing without really going through all of the steps that take to solve some of the problem. So, but this is, I think the important thing is the mentality is changing. And sometimes it doesn't take too long to make a change.
I mean, I think the issues you brought up are very real issues and important ones. I think the other issue is the way that we work with industry. So pharmaceutical industry have to work in a completely different way. We can't have the same kind of attitude that we've had in the past in terms of the kind of trials, combination trials and so on, that we need to be doing in the future. We have to be doing what we call basket trials with industry. So, you know, we have patient population, we carry out genetic testing, we find a particular mutation. We need to put those patients on kind of virtual trials. There needs to be a central pharmacy, the pharmaceutical industry are putting drugs that we can actually put patients on to those drugs, no matter where they are, and so on. So the whole model of the way that we interact with industry and do trials has to change. And I personally think it is. I think there are some companies that are ahead of the game. I think AstraZeneca is one, and the way that they're willing to interact, certainly, from my experience with Cancer K, for example, is completely different than it was even 3 years ago. And so that's encouraging.
Okay, I think we passed the half an hour. Thank you so much. That was a great opportunity. Just the last message, that is, we had no time to discuss that, but these people are really professional, how to move forward with the organization, particularly how to communicate to the public. We need to be much more professional, how to communicate to the public, and have journalists that are more professional on that job. We have a terrible work in this country. We need to provide more information to our journalists to bring the right information to the public, what we can do in the future. So thank you so much. Leonora, I think you should have the last word, no?
Thank you.